5, 4, 3.
Yummy like a gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for November 13th, 2023. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, it's time for the freaks to get their little hearts broken about Silksong yet again, and Call of Duty is in a rough state. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Britton Peele, everybody. But Britton, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. I'm happy to finally be making my giant bomb debut after years and years of pressuring y'all, sneakily making friendships online with as many people as possible.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to make things happen. Britton, tell people a little bit about yourselves, where they could find your work, things like that, and then we'll kind of talk about one of the reasons, the reason you did get your way onto this show, which I'm very happy about, by the way.
Yeah, sure. So, been in the industry for a while. When I was most prolific, I was doing a lot of reviews for GameSpot, kind of back in the Kevin Van Ord days. To date it, I did a lot of reviews for launch titles for the Wii U and the Vita. So it's been a while. But then I backed off a lot from freelancing when I landed a full-time gig at the Dallas Morning News. So if you're in the Dallas area and you read a newspaper and you've wondered, how did somebody get Final Fantasy like Crisis Core on the cover of something? That was me. I somehow managed to convince people to do that.
Most of our audience is in the Dallas area, so they know what you're talking about. They're on top
obviously.
Of that. Yeah. And then, okay, so then the reason that you reached out and I was, this is perfect. You got the PlayStation Portal and the review embargo is up so we could talk about this thing. You've been using it for a little bit. How are you finding it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what a lot of people expected in that it is a really good way to do remote play,
right.
Which, like, for me, I think you're kind of in the similar boat where I have kids. Sometimes my kid wants the TV. Like, actually, remote play is pretty useful.
Yes.
So I was pretty excited to get my hands on it for that reason. And for the most parts, it actually works really well. I've done a lot of remote play on other devices. I don't know how well that comes across. Not much lag. Like, this image is usually pretty crisp. There are, of course, some limitations. The thing that broke it for me was playing Theatrhythm Final Fantasy, the rhythm game.
Yeah, that would probably break it.
I mean, of course, no one's going to be picking this thing up and saying, like, I'm going to play all the rhythm games, but wanted to put it through its paces and say that it works, but it's just off enough that you wouldn't want to do it all the time. The only other game that has really broken for me has been, unfortunately, Alan Wake 2, for a weird reason. Like, the game runs really well. If you just hop in, you can run, you can shoot, you can explore the dark woods easily enough. But the way the touchpad on this thing works, the same way it works on any remote play device, is you have to double tap. You can see when I tap the screen there, like little squares pop up.
Yeah.
You have to double tap those to hit the touchpad. Alan Wake 2 wants you to hit either the right side of the touchpad to go to the mine place or the left to open the map. And I think this only does the center. So when you do that in Alan Wake 2, nothing happens.
That's got to be something they're going to be able to fix, because those touch screens are like, they don't sell crappy touch screens these days. They're all 10-point touch. They know exactly what you're pressing. So that's got to be an upgrade that they can make, right?
I sure hope so. I mean, even when you tap it, there's squares on either side. Like, let me just tap the right side or tap the left side. It shouldn't be that difficult. But yeah, I was really, I was sitting there being like, what am I doing wrong? Am I hitting the wrong button? Something is off here. And that's the conclusion I finally came to, was that it's just expecting one side or the other, and this isn't working right.
That's not the only game that does that either. So that's definitely something that they'll be like, we can't just leave this. They'll have to fix that.
I imagine so. But other than that, like, I played some Jedi Survivor last night. That went fine. I've been spending a lot of time playing Persona 3 Portable, which, it's a PS4 game. It's also on the Switch. I could just play it there, but that works great. Trying to wrap that up before the remake comes out. And it felt like no different than playing it locally. So pretty nice. I am on a Google Mesh network, for what it's worth. The one that your grandpa would walk into a Best Buy and say, that one says Google on it, so it's got to be good.
Right, sure, yeah.
So it's, nothing super fancy and works pretty well. I'm in a small house, but that's kind of where I land. Is it's pretty good if you're okay with knowing that, like, hey, it is still streaming over Wi-Fi. You might drop a little bit here and there, although that has not happened to me very often at all. And there's going to be just some weird, little issues with it, like this touchscreen thing that you'll have to put up with. But if you're in a situation where you need another screen, works pretty well.
Yeah, I'm still very interested in it after seeing some of the reviews and hearing your experience with it. The lag is probably something you don't notice unless it's theater rhythm, right? Unless it's something where the timing definitely matters, and I suppose that would probably cover online games, maybe anything that's head-to-head competitive. I would assume would fall under that same purview, but. Overall, like when you are playing a game that is single player, and even if it's action based, right? Are you getting used to the latency?
Yeah, totally. I even I've been playing some of that Disney kart racer Speedstorm.
Yeah,
it's free to play. I played a little bit of that online actually, and won some races.
Okay,
so you can actually like totally play even some online stuff. Works like remarkably well. I played a little bit of Mortal Kombat 1. I'm not a professional fighting game player, so I would not be the best judge of like, oh, this is horribly off or not. But I feel like if you were just going to hop in and do some invasions stuff or story mode, it's good enough. If you were trying to like actually rank up the ladder or whatever, then you're not thinking about doing this anyway, most likely, right?
Right. Yes. I mean, for me, the where this fits in, and you named it mostly, being able to play around my kids while hanging out, being away from the TV, especially the TV in my office where the PS5 is, where it's down here and everyone else is usually up there. But it's also like, well, I mean, I'm just going to clean up some stuff I was doing in the game. I'm not going to be this. Maybe I'll play a whole game this way. I do play a lot of stuff on my Steam Deck and my Asus ROG Ally, and obviously the Switch, and I play that mostly handheld. So I will play a lot of the games, but in handheld mode. But if it's on a PlayStation 5, the idea of like playing everything on a handheld streaming, well, I'll do a lot of that. But if it's like, okay, here is a daily that I want to take care of. Here is, I want to do some exploration in a place that I've already discovered. Like if Alan Wake 2 did work perfectly, it's like, well, I'm already in this area and I just want to go find a few things that I missed. Having this as an option would be really good. I just, how do you feel about the price for what you're getting and comparing it to maybe doing something on your phone with a backbone or something like that? How do you think it fits into that?
Yeah, so it's $200 if I'm not mistaken, which is not the worst, certainly not the best. I think it is a better experience personally than using a phone or using a tablet. I play a lot of like the Switch in bed, so I'd be kind of horizontal like this, and I've used one of those Razer things for the iPhone, and it's fine. Yes. It's okay. Yeah,
it's okay.
I've done some of that with Xbox games, and it's okay, but this is really comfy. Like they've definitely emulated the DualSense feel. All the features are, it's got the same rumble, the same triggers, all that stuff. So it feels good to hold. The weight is pretty good. The screen is nice and it's nice and big. And I also personally, at the end of the day, a lot of times my phone is almost dead. I don't want to be using that to also be streaming or awkwardly having it plugged in. So for me, it's still probably worth it. But that's going to be such a case-by-case basis thing that it's actually one of the things that, we mentioned probably they'll fix the thing with Alan Wake not being able to work exactly properly. I also worry that this isn't going to be a huge priority for Remedy or Sony, because how big is the audience actually going to be?
Yeah, because this is not like even like PlayStation VR 2, right? PlayStation VR 2 didn't exactly set the world on fire, but it is its own platform. There are going to be teams of people working on just that device and making sure that it is a good piece of hardware and has software support. And this is an extension of the PS5 and like a lot of other peripherals. It's just like you put it on the shelf and people get it or they don't. So I could see that. I think it'll get some updates, and the idea here is this thing isn't some completely new concept. It is the basics there are the same as you do get when you are using the Android app or something like that. So if they make updates to that stuff, the updates should come here. I wonder if that touchscreen issue, if that does that happen with Alan Wake 2 on the phone? God, I don't know. I
haven't had time to test. I imagine so. I was doing a lot of Googling over the weekend, trying to be like, has anyone else encountered this? Turns out maybe not a lot of people play it over remote play.
Yeah.
No one else had asked that question. There is like kind of a bit of firmware in here though that seems specific. It kind of puts the PS Link, which are the headphones. Actually got those here too. They're headphones. They're fine. So the Sony could definitely add some customization or whatever into like, how does the touchscreen work, which could be nice. Weirdly, also, there's airplane mode on here, which makes no sense because you can't use this on a plane unless you've also got your PS5 just sitting next to you plugged in on the plane. So
well,
I don't know.
It can do over the internet, right? It can do remote play over the internet, but I know they don't recommend it. Right.
Yeah. There's probably no way any the nicest airplane Wi-Fi would probably not work properly.
Well, yes, right. Airplane specifically. Yeah, that you're right. That's just one of those things where it's like it's called airplane mode, but the thing doesn't have like a cell signal, so airplane mode would just be turning off Bluetooth and then the Wi-Fi. So yeah, that's that. Yeah, and then it's just a brick. Are there any like local apps of any sort, or does it do anything locally if you turn off the Wi-Fi?
Not that I've been able to find. When you boot it up, it immediately boots into like it's a very streamlined, slick interface. It has a little portal thing, which my son, before I told him the name of the thing, he's 4. He was like, "Oh, it's like a portal." Like, yeah, that nailed it. That's exactly what it is.
From the mouth of babes,
you wake it from sleep. It says hit the X button to connect to your PS5. When you do that, it turns the PS5 on, assuming it's in rest mode, and you're good to go after a few seconds. It works really quickly, really easily. And I'm sure, people are geniuses. Someone will get Doom running on this thing at some point, for sure. I'm sure. But I can't find any way to like hop out of it or anything.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll have more to say about this once I get my hands on one, because I probably am still going to get one. But Britton, thanks for bringing that. Actually, one last thing. Did the screen, does it pop out? Doesn't look like it does.
No, it is just...
It's all one contiguous unit. Okay.
Yeah, you can't take the controllers off. It's kind of got this back part that's... It seems all like one solid piece. I can't say for sure that you couldn't just like pry the screen out of here with a lot of work. But if
I asked you, like, let's just say one of the joysticks broke, can you like look at it and be like, where would you even start when it comes to replacing it?
I don't know. I've never torn down a DualSense, so yeah, I don't know for sure. I will say I was initially using this in like a poor lighting condition in the living room. It took me forever to find the USB and headphone jack.
That's
kind of
weird.
Hidden under here.
Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, I don't see any like obvious screw holes or something. I'm sure they're there, but I wouldn't know.
Oh yeah, and then how is the comfort in terms of weight?
It's nice. Yeah, I played for a few hours last night in bed, just like holding it above me. Didn't drop it on my face or anything.
Orbital bones are doing just fine. Good.
Yeah.
Love to hear it. All right, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you were watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Modern Warfare 3 tops UK physical charts, but sales are down 25% compared to Modern Warfare 2. This is from Chris Scullion at VGC. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 has topped the UK physical game charts, but it failed to hit the launch weekend sales numbers that its predecessor did. According to GfK chart data via GamesIndustry.biz, Activision's latest first-person shooter went straight into the charts at number 1, but physical sales were down 25% compared to those of Modern Warfare 2 last year. The game is currently on track to be the lowest rated entry in the series, with early Metacritic scores from both critics and users coming in much lower than usual. I think this is about what we would expect from something like this. This always felt like a hey, we got to have something ready, and we'll get to a little bit more. There's the other half of the story here about the making of this game and like how it came together. Explains a lot of it, but I think people could feel it from looking from the outside in that Activision was rushing something together here, and the final product feels that way, and the sales are somewhat being affected by it. Now, Call of Duty's still going to be probably the number one best-selling game of the year, likely, but I guess the question is, Britton, do you think this will have a long-term detrimental effect on Call of Duty and Activision now under Microsoft?
I mean, they could always pull something back from the brink, right? It's almost one of those franchises that's too big to fail. But it does definitely feel like we're in a weird position where I haven't even felt like I've seen a lot of people around me hyping up that a new Call of Duty is coming out. Did they even do like the usual like basketball commercials and stuff that they usually have?
I don't remember. I think they did something around that time, but I think it happened a little bit later than it normally did. Yes. I have seen during football this weekend, I was seeing commercials, and the advertisements are all of the big Twitch streamers. Like there's a quote like, this is going to take over my life. And it's like from Nade Shot, who is one of the old guard of the Call of Duty competitive scene, and now is a relatively big streamer. It was him and like Courage. I don't really follow him at all, but yeah, Courage was like in there and be like, oh my God, look at this. And they're doing that kind of thing. We're like, hey, the Twitch streamers really care about this. It's like, okay, I hadn't really seen them do that before, but that's what they're going for with this one. I think the reality here is like there's a couple factors at play where I do think Activision got out, or the former owners of Activision who have now sold to Microsoft got out while the getting was good, because Call of Duty isn't going to go away. Call of Duty is not going to suddenly become a non-factor in gaming, but it is going to have more frequent rough patches like this one. I think making these games is getting harder. Making games overall takes more time and money, and so sticking to the annual release schedule was always going to be troublesome. And when the Activision deal first got announced, even before that, we were talking on this show, and I was talking at GamesBeat when I wrote there about this is going to be difficult to maintain, and Activision doesn't have a lot of other options because they've put everyone on Call of Duty, so they are headed towards something of a brick wall. Now they'll mostly plow through that brick wall, but it is going to nick them a little bit, where they're going to have a year or two where the game isn't very good, or maybe doesn't even come out, or comes out in some stunted phase, and that's what we're getting here. Now, the other side of that is, if they had put this out as DLC, it probably wouldn't have sold as well as this. They probably made a lot more money by saying this is Modern Warfare 3 and pretending that it's a real game, a real new release, instead of just like a map pack with a campaign that they threw together in a year and a half, not even a year and a half. And so, but by all measures, like this is actually a huge success for what is fundamentally DLC, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I do wonder, in the Microsoft era, is it going to be more or less likely that they're going to say like, yeah, you know what, it's okay, Call of Duty, just take a year off. I don't know that under Bobby Kotick and the old regime of Activision that was ever as much of an option.
And I think this is evidence that probably wasn't, right? Like if they could avoid it at any cost, they would avoid it. And here we are with this game, right?
It seems that way, right? Yeah, the train's got to keep going. You can't not have Call of Duty out there around the holiday season, because that's what people are going to be looking for.
Mm-hmm. I expect that you're right. The chances under Activision of them saying it's okay, take an extra year, seemed very low. I think they would have had to get there eventually. It was just like, we don't have any other choice. Under Microsoft, it feels like there's more of a possibility that it's like, well, okay, let's not push things to the brink. Let's take a breather. Let's respect this franchise and its audience, so that we don't burn them out and get them upset, because that can have detrimental effects on games later. Now, you're right. Like this is 1 year of Call of Duty. I think there would have to be multiple years of Call of Duty like this in a row for it to really impact sales long term. But enthusiasm will maybe be a little bit dampened going into the next one. But if the next one has a good showing and it's in the franchises that people like, if it's like, oh, Black Ops is really back, there will be a lot of people who be like, well, yeah, I like Black Ops. I was never a Modern Warfare person, and they'll show up and the game will sell just fine. But this is an example of the unsustainability of where AAA gaming is at, especially under the strategic leadership of someone like Bobby Kotick, whose only creative input is bigger and more frequent. And that's it. And here we are at the sort of the end. We've seen this before with Activision many times with Guitar Hero and with Tony Hawk, where it's like we didn't want the next game to be a bit bigger and we want it to be out as soon as possible. And eventually they just can't keep doing that anymore. And Call of Duty's been the one franchise that's been immune to that up to this point. But it's, at the very least, like I said, getting nicked here. We'll see how long that lasts. I will say at the very least, I'm interested in playing the multiplayer because I like those Modern Warfare 2 maps from 2009 that they're putting into this game. But I don't know how long I'll actually end up playing it for any real reason.
Me writing for a mainstream news outlet, I've historically tried to spend some time with Call of Duty every year because you almost can't get more mainstream than that. And I know, like, early on in my career here at the newspaper, I was covering E3 and I had the stuff I was excited about, and it was clear my audience wanted Call of Duty and The Sims.
Right.
And like it was just those two things. Didn't matter what you showed of those. That was what they cared about because that was all they played. And it maybe wasn't the same person, but those were those major, huge franchises that people always knew about, to the extent that some of my readers didn't realize that Mario games were still coming out, but they knew Call of Duty games were happening like every year.
Yeah.
So even if the giant falls, it's going to take a long time for that to all fade away completely.
Yeah. And I think, Microsoft has a pretty good track record of taking over these major franchises and being good stewards of them, at least with one of the more recent ones. And I guess it's not too recent these days, but Minecraft, where it's like, hey, they've not really missed a beat with Minecraft. Minecraft has continued to grow. It's still very relevant. They've done ways to increase its monetization by creating a store for people to create things and put stuff in that store. And there haven't been a lot of complaints about that because it's usually powered by the people in the community who are the most creative that people want to buy stuff from. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, being able to apply some of that stuff to Call of Duty seems like in the end would probably be a good thing. And that steady hand of having a company that's not afraid of the next quarter's earnings report in the way Activision or any third party would be, is going to give these developers a little bit more breathing room. And it just feels like, boy, they need it when you look at this game and where it's at. So we'll see what happens with the next one. I don't think that they're going to slow down the Call of Duty machine immediately. Next year's game is probably very far along the way. But as we get, 2-3 years into this ownership cycle, we probably will see them like, okay, now that we have gotten out of the momentum that came out of Activision before we took over, we can slow things down a little bit, recognize where our weaknesses are, and take times to address those. And that means pushing games out. Maybe it comes out, maybe it just skips 1 year. Maybe it just comes out 6 months later and comes out in the middle of a year one time. That would be weird. But Call of Duty can come out whenever and probably do just fine.
Yeah, I do think that's really important to note for anyone who, next year under Xbox, they're going to be like, why isn't Call of Duty great now? Like, Activision's a huge ship, and turning a ship that huge takes time. So, yeah, you're exactly right.
So how did this happen? Well, Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg reports with a story called New Call of Duty Draws Harsh Reviews After Rushed Development. There's a lot over here. I've kind of got some bullet points, though, that we'll go over. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 was developed in less than a year and a half the time of previous iterations. It was actually, I think, 16 months is how long Sledgehammer worked on the campaign. So that's not even a year and a half. The development process was hurried because the game was conceived to fill a gap in the release schedule. The game's story was originally conceived as a smaller scale Modern Warfare spinoff, but it was rebooted into a full sequel. The reboot ate into the schedule and forced the developers to complete the new campaign in roughly 16 months. The game's story has received bleak reviews from critics. Analysts say that even a critical flop probably won't change much about the series over the next few years, though, and that's probably correct. Listen, I think in one hand, it's pretty impressive that Sledgehammer was able to put together something that is even a little like no one's saying like, oh, this is a complete mess. It's not King Kong, right? From Game Mill. It's just boring, is what people are saying about the campaign for Modern Warfare 3. And at a certain point, putting out a boring Modern Warfare campaign in 60 months is like, wow, that's good for you. But clearly, this is just them filling in a gap. And I think it speaks to what we were just talking about, of how afraid they were of going a year without releasing a major Call of Duty, because they have no idea what a DLC map pack for Modern Warfare 2 would have looked like or would have done. It probably would have been fine, but I think we could probably, I'm guessing it probably wouldn't have been, 75% of every person who played Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 bought that expansion, which is basically what has happened here, right?
And probably would have come in at a lower price points, and
Very good point.
All the numbers probably, there were probably people just saying like, no, this needs to be a full experience that people are going to pay us the big bucks for.
Yeah, I think, when they probably just looked, when they're in that situation, you get why they make all those choices. But it feels like, man, are there no consequences for putting out a bad Call of Duty? I guess this one was probably never really going to pay that price. It's like with Assassin's Creed, right? When that game, Unity, came out, and that was had a lot of issues. Unity did pretty fine overall, at least in those first couple of weeks. It was the next game, Syndicate, that I think was pretty good, that paid the price. And people are like, we're not taking a chance on this. We're afraid of spending our money on Assassin's Creed now. And I know analysts, and I know we were just saying it's probably going to be fine. But I think people might be a little bit more hesitant with Call of Duty after this experience. But we'll see.
Yeah, my only it's not really concern, but my thought is that I feel like we've been saying this for the past few Call of Duties.
Yes.
Of like, well, the next one might suffer, and it's maybe been slowly that has been true, but
it's actually, I mean, it was on the upswing into Call of Duty Modern Warfare. And then I think the next one, which I can't remember now, was that like World War II or Vanguard? I can't keep them straight anymore. I think that was just fine. And then Modern Warfare 3 was down compared to Modern Warfare 2, but not much. So, or Modern Warfare, 2 was down compared to the first one, which is actually the second one. It's very confusing. It's Call of Duty, everybody. I'm so sorry. All right. Nintendo will hold an Indie World live stream on Tuesday. This is from Chris Scullion at VGC. Nintendo has announced a new live stream focused on indie games. The company's latest Indie World showcase will take place on Tuesday, November 14th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern, and 5 p.m. GMT. The presentation will be viewable on Nintendo's YouTube channel and via the video embedded at the top of its page for this. According to Nintendo, the new presentation will feature roughly 20 minutes of new announcements and updates on indie games coming to Nintendo Switch. The last Indie World presentation was back in April. Hey, Britton, is this going to be where people see anything about Silk Song?
I don't know if I say yes, if that'll jinx it in a good way or a bad way at this point, but it's certainly what everyone's like. Was it trending on Twitter / X?
Is.
Like,
yeah, almost
seconds
certainly.
of the announcement. Yeah, I mean, until that thing is actually out, that's going to be what everyone in chat during this thing is just going to be asking about, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the last time we saw that game was the Xbox showcase last year, right? I don't think we've seen anything about it since. They've mentioned that it's now not coming out this year. I think that's right. But either way, we haven't seen it in a very long time. So we're maybe due an update. But also, last time we saw it was at an Xbox event, and it seemed like it's they have a lot of a relationship with Xbox. So maybe we wouldn't see it at a Nintendo Indie World Showcase. Also, Silk Song, Hollow Knight might be too big for an indie showcase at this point. That should be at like a real direct or a real Xbox showcase at this point. So I don't know. I'm like a little skeptical that we'll see it, which I think is safe because we probably won't see it. What about Hades 2? Any chance we get that? Now, I know Hades 2 is going to go into early access, but boy, I think Nintendo should get off their thing about that and let early access games happen. What do you think?
That is my hope for what we would see here. Maybe it's probably not too early, right? That's coming close enough in the early access period that we could
I mean, it was originally supposed to come out this year, and then they moved it to early next year for early access. It's coming soon enough that we could see something, maybe at the Game Awards, maybe here, but probably not here because I don't think the game's going to come out on Switch until it's 1.0. just because Nintendo doesn't have any way for these developers to do early access. Not really. So
Yeah, I do know that the original game like sold really well on the Switch. So it
Yes.
seems like that's a thing that both Supergiant and Nintendo would want to foster, and I'd be all for it. Like I think it played great on the Switch.
I think
but
go ahead.
Yeah. I think you're right. The early access thing is a wrinkle for sure. So like unless they call it 1.0 and just say, yeah, but we're going to be improving it like we did the last time around, and just don't call it early access and get away with it that way, maybe, but it would be tricky.
Yeah, I think if there was any game or developer that could get Nintendo to loosen up on that stuff, it probably would be Supergiant and Hades 2, because Hades did so well on the Switch. But I still think the developers probably think, it'll do fine once we go into 1.0, and let's just work with what we're used to. I mean, previously they did early access on Epic. I think they're doing it on Steam this time, and Epic, but mostly on Steam because that's where most people get it. And it's like, we'll just do what we know and do it on PC, and that way we could just focus on that version and not have to run the Steam early access or the Switch early access version at the same time, because that would be kind of a headache or troublesome, and they're a small team. So, I just really want Hades 2 as soon as possible. That's where I'm at. And then, I don't know, are there any other indie games or developers you want to hear from? I would like to see that UFO 50 game from Derek Yu.
Yeah.
That would be cool. This would be a cool place for that to pop up again.
And that's been MIA for a while, right?
Yes.
So like it just keeps disappearing. That would be really exciting.
Yeah, I think the last time we heard about that, they were like, they confirmed it's still happening. And I think that was earlier this year. But again, I might be thinking of something from multiple years ago at this point. But I would love to see that. I don't know, anything that comes to mind for you, though?
Yeah, other than Silk Song, it's not like we have a big lineup that I can think of where, I think this time last year it was Sports Story that we were all waiting for. Like, when's that going to release? And that finally did happen. So I think maybe it's a good thing that we could be surprised, because that's one of the great things about these indie showcases is you see something that you had never heard of before.
That's right.
Like, oh, that looks really cool. I know the Switch version of Dave the Diver isn't out yet, is it? Like that might be a candidate for something.
That could be a shadow drop, right? We usually get 1 or 2, maybe even 3 shadow drops during these indie showcases. I could see that happening.
Yeah. So other than that, like it kind of blurs the line a little bit, but I'm always hoping for a new something like Cadence of Hyrule, where like it's technically an indie game, but it's Nintendo letting an indie play in their playground.
Yes.
And I've loved Cadence of Hyrule a lot. So I just am always hoping that I see something else like that from them. And I keep getting disappointed.
Yeah.
Imagine
the society we would live in if Nintendo did more Cadence of Hyrule like stuff. It would be a perfect utopia, but we don't live there. There was an update on UFO 50 from November 1st. Just a matter of weeks ago. Posted. This is from Derek Yu. Posted a UFO 50 development update on the Steam forums. The quick summary is no 2023 release, but we're working on in-game stuff, and 2024 is looking very likely. But more details on where we're at here, and then there's a link to the blog on the Steam community forum for UFO 50. So that's cool. I am for people that don't know, UFO 50 is the follow-up game from the guy that did Spelunky, Derek Yu, but it is like one of those 50-in-1 cartridges you might have gotten for the NES all those years ago, where Derek worked with a bunch of other developers to make small, tiny games that are not meant to feel like micro games or mini games. They're meant to feel like full, complete games, but full, complete games in the context of the 1980s. So something that would have been, you either beat it in a couple hours, or maybe it's a sprawling RPG, but there's not much to it. So yeah, I've always been curious about this. Really interested to see where they're at. I would just love an update. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, chat tells me that Dave the Diver is out on Switch, so that theory is busted already.
Fair enough. All right then, cool. But there's been a couple other indie games this year that haven't released on Switch yet that probably will get their drop here, and I'll look forward to that. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break. We got a whole bunch more news to get to after this, which we will do so after a moment. And we're back, and we're talking PS5's detachable disk drive and how it can reportedly be swapped between machines easily. This is from Jordan Midler at VGC. For people wondering, the new PS5 Slim is out, has that detachable drive. We talked about how there might be some headaches with getting these drives associated with machines because it needs to reach out to a server. But so far, it seems like it's been pretty easy as long as that server is accessible. A new video has shown a user swapping a registered PS5 detachable disk drive between consoles. Posted to YouTube by Mystic, if a player finds themselves in a situation wherein they have two detachable disk drives and want to swap them between PS5 systems, the system can quickly register the new drive, quelling fears that the drives may be locked to one system. Instead, the drives seem to operate more closely to a peripheral, such as a controller. If a player resets their PS5 with a detachable disk drive, the system will have to connect online again in order to register it, but once the drive has been registered once, it can be used offline again without issue. So the long-term concerns about this, Britton, still exist of people worried like, hey, what happens when that server goes offline? That's still years away, though. In the meantime, if you do get a PS5 Slim and then a PS5 Slim Digital, and for some reason you're like, well, I have the disc and that'll be faster, let's just take the disc drive up to that one. It sounds like a pretty easy process to do that and take advantage of it. So you only need the one disc drive in that situation. Is this a concern for you, though, if eventually we get to a point where that server does go offline and you're worried about your physical media?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for all the game preservation reasons, obviously, but even just I spent a lot of years living at my parents' place in the middle of nowhere where the only internet was really crappy satellite internet that was not reliable whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So that really ingrained in me that I need physical copies of as much as possible, because I could just never trust that my internet was going to be up or that I would be able to download an update or whatever. So I think there's, the situations like that are maybe few and far between, especially when you're talking about the quote unquote hardcore gaming audience, but they're definitely there. So it's good that there's at least, it's not as strict and locked down as maybe some people feared.
Yeah.
But I do think there's reason to have concerns about the future.
And, the good news is, like you said, it's not as locked down as some people feared. And those fears were there because it actually is a bit of a hassle to get a disk drive from one console to work on another in most cases. And so people were imagining, it's going to be similar to how that works with traditional consoles that have the disk drive built in. The PS5 does work this way, I believe. But many consoles have this issue where they are associated in a strong way. There's a motherboard and the daughter board, and they connect and they build this connection, and that's permanent. And so the fact that you can just basically hot swap, it's not hot swapping, but basically it's going to feel that effect, to that effect. That's pretty good news. And it means that, Sony isn't trying to get you to buy multiple disk drives for your PlayStation 5 Slim digitals or whatever. You can just have the one and move it around as needed. We'll see long term. I hope that, I think ideally what happens here is, near the end of life for this system, Sony's server, before it goes offline, just basically sends out an update and makes it so you don't need this. But I mean, the problem is these ones being manufactured now are going to need it no matter what, because if one sits on a shelf for 20 years and then someone buys that and then they try to bring their disc to use it on that and the server's offline, there's just nothing you can do there unless someone in the community has an answer, or maybe I guess Sony could ship discs out that have the link built in so that it kind of just acts as if it's connected to the internet, but really it's coming from a disc. There are solutions. Probably what's going to happen though is the homebrew community will solve this, and we have to rely on them like normal.
Yeah, I just imagined a scenario where a kid is going to a friend's house and bringing a copy of a game, but they're like, I don't have the PlayStation with the disc drive, and now they can bring their disc drive, I guess.
Yeah, so interesting. It's
always that issue.
Yeah, I guess so. That's pretty. I'm glad it works that way now. The convenience factor seems pretty nice. All right. There's a rumor Sony has some more single player releases still to announce for next year. They've been pretty quiet, but Alex Hopley over Game Reactor has the story. Now that Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is behind us, you might be looking at Sony's first party single player release calendar and feeling a little concerned. There are a fair few games that could come out in 2024. Marvel's Wolverine, Death Stranding 2, Rise of the Ronin, and yet there's nothing with that release window slapped onto it at the time of this writing. Wushu Studios developer Shinobi 602 is trying to put our fears at ease, though, as they've gone out on Reset Era to claim that PlayStation has more to put out in 2024. It's just a matter of whether these games can make their schedule. There's definitely a lot to look forward to for Sony fans, but apart from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, not many of the games that could come out in 2024 have a solid launch window. Britton, I'm expecting Wolverine to actually come out next year, late next year. It could slip into 2025, but I think if all things go as planned, that game probably will make it by holiday of next year, which will be amazing because Insomniac just released Spider-Man 2, but that's a big studio. They have multiple teams. I wouldn't be surprised. And then Death Stranding 2 also could happen, but if it doesn't, early 2025 is fine. But Sony's got to have more than what we know about, right? They've been very quiet for an extended period of time. They've got a lot of studios. They have a lot of partners they work with. They've been making a lot of third-party deals. We're probably just in a waiting period where Sony has been quiet for whatever reason, and they're going to surprise us here early in 2024 and say, hey, let's lay out what's really happening. And I expect 2, 3, maybe even 4 games for next year. What are you thinking?
I think I'm in the same boat. It's not maybe the same level, but I could also see some Spider-Man 2 DLC dropping to, keep people entertained with what they've already got. I do wonder, though, this year has been so massive in terms of so many games that we've been waiting on for years, all hitting and all being good. It wouldn't surprise me if next year, by comparison at least, feels a little bit more quiet.
Yeah.
At least maybe until next holiday season. I could see, March, April, May getting a lot of announcements of stuff that will hit before the end of the year, and that'll be exciting. But I don't know. I'm interested in seeing how the summer shapes up because I think this summer was really strong, and I don't know if 2024 is going to be the same way.
Yeah. That last PlayStation showcase, where I think a lot of people were expecting to get answers to questions like this one, what does Sony have in terms of first-party single-player games that are going to come out in the next calendar year? That was missing that for the most part, and it had a lot of answers about some live service games, but even those feel sketchy in terms of when they're coming out. And I think if Sony has like 1 or 2 of those maybe come out next year, and then has Wolverine and one other game, that's going to feel like a pretty robust year for them, I think. So it's not like they need to get to that 4 or 5 single player, big narrative, big budget games. And really that's not reasonable anymore. Those games are too big. They're too expensive. They take too much time. And frankly, they did just kind of rely on Spider-Man this year, and they're doing just fine. Like, they're selling a ton of PlayStations. The hardware's doing really well. The third-party games are very strong. It was one of the best years ever. You could play Alan Wake 2 and Resident Evil 4 Remake and all these other things on your PlayStation 5 and be just happy with the console as it is. And then Spider-Man 2 capping off the year is going to feel very strong. And but I get why some people who are big Sony fans have been looking at them and like, hey, in the past, you've told us, hey, in 3 years, we're going to have a God of War game, and it's going to be awesome. And so the fact that they've been silent on projects like that for some time now, it's like, well, do you have anything like that? And it's like, I think it's pretty safe to assume they do, and they're being silent for whatever reason while they figure out maybe how to position these live service games against those games. I think that might be part of it, is they are afraid of taking the oxygen out of the room for this new initiative that they had set up and still has some momentum, even despite the setbacks with live service games. And so I think they probably will be quiet for a little bit longer. And then maybe early next year, they'll lay out what 2024 looks like, and it will be probably a couple of live service games, and then Wolverine and one other thing. And I think that would be pretty exciting, at least, in my opinion. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that would be a robust enough year, especially with third parties doing what they do all the time. I also wonder, they could be taking a cue from Nintendo, where for a while people were saying about Nintendo, like, what do they even have other than Zelda? Like, it's just going to be Tears of the Kingdom and nothing else. And then they came out with Pikmin 4 and Mario RPGs coming out and all this stuff that like really padded out their year, where no one is saying that anymore. Like, oh, it was just Zelda. So I could see people right now being in a position of like, oh, just Wolverine. And then by the end of next year, they say, oh, actually, Sony put out a few things that are really exciting.
Yep. And
would be a good time for maybe another Astrobot or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
Put one of those out.
I mean, I think that's really the other side of this is we are expecting Sony to have big AAA blockbuster games and then these live service games. And I think we do keep wondering, where are just the one tier down that you could put out maybe more frequently, like an Astrobot? That would be cool. And now they closed Japan Studios, a series of teams that could have done a lot of those games. So it's like maybe they're not interested in that sort of thing anymore. But you know, at least give me Astro, please. All right, Warner Brothers responds to Mortal Kombat 1 $10 fatality backlash with 2 free fatalities. This is from Wesley Yinpool at IGN. Warner Brothers is giving Mortal Kombat 1 players who bought the controversial $10 Halloween fatality with by giving them 2 free fatalities amid a vociferous backlash over the fighting game's aggressive monetization. Mortal Kombat 1 publisher Warner Brothers Games and developer NetherRealm were heavily criticized in October for selling a Halloween fatality for 1,200 dragon crystals, 1,250 of which can be bought in a bundle for $10. This was a pretty beefy backlash. I saw where people are like, when they saw other people using online, like they would mock those players. But I do wonder how often we can come back to this without recognizing that people buy these DLCs, and that's a big part of it. And at the same time, I think people voicing their criticism of these companies for maybe overcharging for DLC and little microtransactions is still getting it's having some effect on these companies. They're like, you know what, maybe you're right. Here's some free stuff. And that doesn't happen unless there's a backlash. But people do buy these things. So like, where do you fall on that spectrum, Britton?
Yeah, it's I think I'm usually with you where like the public pressure can have at least a bit of an effect. And I mean, I would never personally buy a fatality. Like that's just not in my realm of my nether realm of things I care too much about. So I'm not shocked that people were maybe looking at this deal and saying, I don't know, this is not what I would hope for after spending $70 on this game, that I'm also like doing all this invasions content and stuff that like for me, I had fun with the first season doing invasion stuff and spent season currency on cosmetics. And I was like, yeah, this is fine. Seems well balanced enough. I'm getting plenty of these coins. I don't need more than that. So yeah, I think if they're going to try to convince me to pay for more stuff, it needs to be something worthwhile.
Yeah. And the fatalities just feels like an especially tough one to get by most gamers, because, you know, when we were first having the arguments about DLC, it's like, what's going to happen? Are we going to have to pay for fatalities in video games next? And it's like, it's not exactly that, where it's, oh, put in $1 to do a fatality. But they are selling us fatalities now. It's like, man, there was a time when those would all just come with the game. I think NetherRealm and Warner Brothers might argue, well, no, we're giving these are extras and we're doing more work. But it's like, I doubt that's actually how this played out. This is the old argument of this was probably ready to go and you held it back because you want to have an event to make it feel, you know, keep people engaged and give people something to spend money on. That said, there's a World of Warcraft or maybe there was a Blizzard developer who's on YouTube, and they were like, they put out these shorts of their talks when they talk to their Twitch chat or something like that. And he did this thing where he's like, hey, I worked on StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty for 2 years, and I did overtime nonstop. It was a ton of work, and that the company spent a ton of money on there. And that game, StarCraft 2, made less money than the first Sparkle Horse DLC for World of Warcraft did, and that was a $10 horse that people could get in World of Warcraft. And it's like, that made more money than the video game StarCraft 2. And you just can't, at a certain point, we can't fight back against the behavior of people buying these things. And I say that, and it's like, well, the way you can fight back is get loud. And that does have an effect, but I don't think we should expect to be able to stop these companies from doing more of this in the future. It's probably just going to keep happening because a lot of people just want their fun thing and they aren't paying attention to this. And it turns out they either outnumber us or they have more money than us. So what are we going to do?
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
a fan of like seasonal contents. Like Christmas Nights was miraculous. I'm all for give me a Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas reason to like come back to your game, and that stuff takes work. I'm okay with the developer needing money to make that work happen. That is totally fine. But yeah, I do wonder, especially with the backdrop of everything happening at Warner Brothers right now, and them even explicitly saying like, "Hey, we're going to do live service stuff now more than anything single player focused." That, I mean, maybe I'm biased because I just really love single player stuff, but I don't love that trend.
Yeah, and it's like, how do they decide how to price these things? They have been getting more and more and more expensive. And I guess sometimes I get it when it's like, oh, we're going to give you a themed skin. And so we got to give some of this money to the Bruce Willis estate and make sure that everyone over there gets their cut. And so when we put him in a video game, it's going to cost a little bit more. It's going to be $15. And it's like, well, $15 for like a skin still feels insane. And really $10 for one fatality is pretty extreme, but it's at the same time, the people do buy them. So it's like everything costs what people will spend on it. And if people will spend that money on it, how do we argue against it? It's a tough situation. I do think if these things were more reasonably priced, the angst against them would be much lower, but I think so with their profit margins, so they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Netflix is bringing Hades to iOS devices. This is from Kieran Harris at Game Reactor. One of 2020's finest games is coming to iOS devices in 2024, courtesy of Netflix. The beloved roguelike Hades is heading to the platform, and it's joining Netflix's growing library of games with a no in-game ads or additional fees. All right. I think we mentioned this on the last show, or we mentioned it somewhere, but hey, I'm excited about this. Hades is one of my favorite games. I'll play that yet another place. Probably won't have a full playthrough, but just being able to have it on my phone will be pretty cool because I already have a Netflix subscription. How do you feel about these games that are like exclusive on mobile to Netflix, especially big games like Hades?
Yeah, I think in concept, at least, I'm all for it. I will say, we were talking about the Portal earlier. Hades is not a game I want to play with the touchscreen, if that's even an option. So you're going to need a backbone or something there, I think, to have an ideal experience. But yeah, logging into your Netflix account of all things and seeing Into the Breach, Hades, Oxenfree, like they've just quietly amassed this really great library of games that, maybe I've already played all those ones I just mentioned other places, but especially if they're things that I'm trying to talk a family member into playing, like, hey, you should really try Hades. They maybe don't have a console or don't want to pay for a game that they may not like. I'd say, hey, you are subscribed to Netflix. Try Hades. It's phenomenal. I think that's great.
Yeah, me too. And it's it is. This is on iOS devices. I wonder if I'm sure. Yeah, and Android. Do any of the games work on the TV apps yet? I don't think so. Right. This is just a mobile only thing.
I don't think so. I have a pretty older TV, but I haven't seen them there. Whereas, if I open up Netflix on my phone, they're like the second thing I see is the games.
Yeah, I definitely have seen it. Like at this point, I'll open up the Netflix app on my phone, and sometimes they're like, "Oh, you want the games?" I'm like, "Well, not really, but I mean, cool. That's a good reminder that they're here." But I haven't seen that on my TV yet. Yes, and Joey Gilson chat says I have a newer LG. It doesn't have games on Netflix. I don't think it works on TVs yet. That would be pretty cool. I would definitely play this on my TV using Netflix every once in a while. All right, Mario RPG remake developer has been revealed, and spoilers are circulating because the game is leaked online. This is from Andy Robinson at VGC. Real quick, I have seen like literally 8 people playing this live streamed on TikTok, Britton. I go through.
I was gonna say TikTok is exactly where I've seen it.
I've seen a ton of it. It's like, oh my god, people are just like, and they're like, well, I got the game early. It got delivered early. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it did. That's definitely not what's happening here, homie. But yeah, this game is everywhere. It leaked, and it's also very very fun to see the frustration from reviewers who are like, boy, I wish I could talk about a game that everyone else is allowed to talk about because they are stealing it. It's like, yeah, man, Nintendo, they can't help themselves.
Yeah. I have a related but different frustration, and that's when this kind of started happening at the beginning of the Switch era, but it happened with a DS game. It was like Bowser's Inside Story or something. that's when Nintendo locked down access for me. Being at a mainstream outlet, I'm not writing for GameSpot or whatever. So they stopped giving me most games early because they're like, hey, Nintendo's really worried about this stuff leaking, keeps happening, so we're gonna just lock everything way down. So they locked everything way down, and this is still happening. And here I am with no review copy of Mario RPG.
Yep.
Kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that's. I mean, they continued to lock stuff more and more out throughout this generation, and adding new security. I think Nintendo Japan really believes that the biggest security threat is Western journalists. They're like, that's where all the leaks are coming from, and it's never actually been true. And if it has been, it's like some fluke case. But they overreact, and they just are still afraid. Especially if you're writing online journalists, they're afraid of that. So it's very strange. But yeah, so the developer is, let's see. Yes. Arta Piazza, who did a bunch of work on the Dragon Quest series, for a very long time. The studio's been around since like 1989 or something like that. They've worked with Square a lot on their games and their ports. And I think they did the Dragon Quest 7 remake on DS, and I think they or 3DS or whatever it was. And they did a bunch of the CG and stuff for the PS2 and DS versions of Dragon Quest 3. So there is like a lineage there of working with Square. So the idea of like, hey, a Square associated team taking this over where Square themselves aren't really involved with this Super Mario RPG remake, that makes some sense. And it seems like they've done a pretty good job. I do wonder why Nintendo is never just like, oh yeah, and we're working with this studio on making this game, but that's Nintendo. They just pretend their games are made by elves inside of trees, right?
As far as I know, that's still the case.
That could be true. Yes, we don't know. Something. All right.
But I that original game is amazing. The remake looks great, so it makes sense that it's someone with some pedigree coming in and taking over that work. So I'm very much looking forward to playing it on Friday.
Yep. Yeah. I'm gonna download this, so I'm gonna pre-install it and have it ready to go. I'm really looking forward to it. All right, last couple of stories here. Let's hit these real quick. Digital Extremes confirms job cuts as it closes its external projects division. This is from Tom Ivan at VGC. Warframe studio Digital Extremes has confirmed a round of job cuts tied to the closure of its external projects division. According to PC Gamer, the company is shutting its publishing wing and transferring control of online action game Wayfinder, which was released in early access this summer for PC and PlayStation consoles, to its developer Airship Syndicate, who will continue operating it separately from Digital Extremes. And then over at Unity says it will likely lay off some staff in the next few months. This is from Chris Scullion at VGC. Unity appears set to lay off some of its staff in the coming months. As spotted by The Verge, the company made reference to potential layoffs in its earnings report for Q3 2023 in the section where it would normally provide guidance for shareholders on what it expects it will do in the next quarter and beyond. Unity instead explained that it wasn't providing guidance because it was planning structural changes, which means layoffs. Those were probably long in the making, probably not related to any sort of their business changes that were well documented in the press a few weeks ago. These layoffs continue to happen. I think that we kind of continue looking for what is happening in any of these individual studios or publishers that is causing this. I think mismanagement. I think you could find poor judgment from management in every single one of these cases. But the reality is that stuff was being covered up by cheap capital a few years ago, where interest rates were low and people could borrow money and easily make payroll by doing that. And now that's just not an option anymore. And so all these companies don't have that buffer. And anytime there is an oncoming or an error or an own goal that has caused a reduction in profit margin, these companies are immediately just ripping off the Band-Aid and then throwing a bunch of people out onto the street. And it's frustrating because, as always, it's usually not the people getting laid off's fault that this is happening, right?
Yeah, it's just a terrible thing. And you don't see it exclusively in games, but you can have people who are meeting their goals, doing exactly what their management asked them to do, and that ends up not mattering, which is really frustrating, really depressing. I don't know that I have much to say other than that. Like, it just really sucks.
Yep. It just continues to be a bummer, especially in such a strong year for gaming, where gaming is clearly like on this strong footing. And you would imagine, okay, we can take the momentum from this year and build a better gaming industry next year. And that doesn't really feel possible, because actually what's happening is a lot of these companies don't know don't know how to carry anything forward, because they're actually reeling from some mistake they made, despite their games selling really well. All right. You know what? We got the Game Awards nominations happening here in a minute. We'll talk about those. But first, let's get to the poll result from last week. I got that here somewhere. Actually, you know why? Get that set up. Britton, why don't you tell people where they could find you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, all the things at just Britton Peele. I try to get my name wherever I can. And since it's not common, it's usually not that hard. If you are in the Dallas area, again, I write for the Dallas Morning News. So if you ever pick up a physical paper, if you're one of those people, you can do that. I'm in there sometimes. I do a lot of product management stuff though now, so I'm not even writing all the time. So you do you. Mostly I'm on social media. Sometimes I'm in the Game Mess Mornings chat, so you can find me there.
Excellent. Yes, hang out with us more often, Britton. We always love having you in the chat, but actually come hang out on the show. It was awesome having you. All right, we got the nominees here. We'll get to that right after we read the results of this poll. Do you own any eyebrow waggle adult video games on Steam? 12% said yes. 46% said no, and 42% said, what are you, a cop? And so we know what those people are doing. We know what they're down to. Okay, let's see here. I got the poll results. Let me see if I can bring them up here into this thing. Control C, and then move it up here into the gamer browser. All right, it's loading because of course he loves his overproduced websites over there at the Keeleys. Let's see, nominees. If I click that, is that going to just work? Yes, Monday nominees announced. There we go. All right, it's still view all categories. No results exist. Try another search. Okay, someone help me out here. This website does suck. If someone in chat wants to post like what's happened so far for give me game of the year exactly. I'm not going to no YouTube video.
I'm pretty sure Wario64 posted them. So
okay, there we go. Thank you, Jamie H. Christmas Eve. Let's do that instead. Let's go here. Okay. Let's see here. So the Game Awards 2023 Game of the Year nominees are Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4. That should make Mike happy. Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That is a really solid list. Do any snubs immediately come to mind for you, Britton?
I think some people were thinking maybe Final Fantasy would have a shot. It's one of my favorite games of the year, probably, but I'm not shocked to not see it on this list. No Pikmin 4. I think maybe you and I, Grubb, are the ones that would be most upset about that. But yeah, no, this is... And sorry, Mike, with the possible exception of RE4, this is exactly the list I would probably put together as well.
Yeah, same. I really like this. I mean, well, of course, I would like Pikmin 4 to be up there and some of my other favorites, but trying to figure out, like, putting my pulse or finger on the pulse and trying to figure out like what could make it. I'm like a little surprised Resident Evil 4 made it, but I've been playing that game recently, so hey, it deserves it. It's a very good game. Let's see, Best RPG, Lies of P, Sea of Stars, Starfield, Final Fantasy 16, and Baldur's Gate 3 is in there. If there's other categories, I haven't seen them yet. Okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. We will be talking over the Game Awards later this year, everybody, so look out for that. I'll be in a little studio shouting at a screen likely, so enjoy that. And we'll see who will win. We'll take bets. We'll do channel points or something like that. All right. One last thing here. The new poll question, which should be live now. Let's see if I got it right here. Yes. Now that reviews are out, how do you feel about the PlayStation Portal? Are you getting one? Probably getting one. Probably not getting one, or not getting one. You can vote on that by going to youtube.com/@giantbomb. Hit the community tab there and vote. And we'll discuss it on Wednesday's show of Game Mess Mornings here on Giant Bomb. Speaking of Giant Bomb, tomorrow is the Bombcast. I might be playing more Mortal Kombat 1 later today, finishing up that story. We'll see. I'll go in the meeting right now and figure all that out. And then later this week, you can expect a Blight Club, expect a few other things. We'll be looking forward to all of that. All right, Britton, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a blast. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have you back. And thank you, everybody, for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye. All right. Still hot mic'd. Let's go.